When talent stops being enough, flesh becomes the entry fee. To win, Helen doesn't have to become someone better, she has to become someone else. Greetings, ghouls, and welcome to a dive into horror television. Tonight we explore Beauty Rest from Tales from the Crypt. We open to Helen acting in an advertisement for the fragrance Ball Buster. I wonder what that smells like. The director seems to love her. He tells her that he's directed commercials for years, but he's never had an actress take direction like her. He's wowed by her brilliance. She asks him if she got the part, and he says yes. We cut to Helen in her agent's office, and we learn that she didn't get the part after all. She's been trying to make it in the entertainment industry for 10 years, and she's still coming up short with luck. The part she was dying for was awarded to her roommate, Joyce. Helen thinks she's sleeping her way to the top. She's outraged. When she gets home, Helen is in a shitty mood and has no problem being short-tempered with her roommate. Helen is hungry, but she's sick of eating rice cakes and goes right for Joyce's ice cream. She accuses Joyce of spreading her legs to get the role. Helen wants Joyce out of their apartment. She binges on food while Joyce tells her why she's so happy. Joyce has been seeing this guy for a couple weeks and he's in charge of a beauty pageant. He's going to make her the winner of the contest. Joyce has a note for the guy emceeing the pageant that says she's the one to win. Helen can't control her envious rage and goes to the bathroom to find pills. She finds a bottle of Doze Off and has a terrible idea. We cut to Helen bringing tea to Joyce's room. Helen apologizes for her bug out, and sweetheart Joyce forgives her. It doesn't take long for Joyce to start feeling off. She drank her tea quickly and now her vision is wobbly. She collapses on the bed and Helen takes her note for the MC. Helen intends on dosing her enough for her to sleep through the contest, but Joyce went and dropped dead. Helen makes a fake suicide note and places the bottle of Doze Off in Joyce's hand. Helen takes the note with her and goes to the pageant. She finds George, the MC, and shows him the note. He accepts the news that she will win, and one of the contestants overhears their conversation. Helen goes to her dressing room. One of the contestants confronts her for sleeping with someone to win the pageant. Helen denies it, and George interrupts. She's got to get into her costume. On stage, we hear a hilarious answer to the question, "What would you do on your last day on Earth?" Then it's Helen's turn. Her question is, what is the thing you feel most guilty about? She's floored and says she has no regrets and she's been true to herself. Helen waits for George and asks him what the hell kind of question was that. He pulls her aside and rips up the note. It's no longer valid, it's out of his hands. Helen goes to the contestant next door, Drusilla, and accuses her of being a whore that slept with George to win the contest. Drusilla laughs at her accusation. She didn't sleep with him, she threatened him that she would call the cops and sue him for sexual harassment. Helen is dead set on proving that she's not the kind of girl that would sleep with someone to get ahead. However, she is the kind of girl who would kill to win a beauty contest. Helen chokes her till she's lifeless. So Helen's back in her dressing room and George comes in looking for Drusilla. Helen's still trying to win the contest, so she's brought down to a makeup artist who's extremely rude. The makeup artist swears it's the last year he's doing this. He's sick to death of this pageant and the stuck-up queens. It's finally time for the finale. George sings a lovely song. We meet Helen. She's Miss Autopsy 1992. What a twist. This is one of my favorites from the whole show. In Beauty Rest, scarcity is not a background condition. It is the primary organizing principle of the world Helen inhabits. Beauty economies, modeling, acting, pageantry, advertising are structured around the deliberate restriction of opportunity. There are countless aspirants, but only a handful of visible winners. This balance is not accidental. Scarcity functions as a disciplinary mechanism. When opportunities are few and unstable, individuals become easier to control, more compliant, and more willing to accept exploitation in exchange for the possibility of advancement. Beauty is treated as expiring capital. Helen is constantly reminded, implicitly and explicitly, that time is running out. Age becomes a threat rather than a neutral fact, and urgency replaces reflection. Sociologists describe this as manufactured precarity. When people are kept in a state of perpetual insecurity, they're less likely to challenge the system and more likely to internalize failure as personal inadequacy. Helen does not think the system is broken, she thinks I'm falling behind. Scarcity also collapses ethical distance. In environments where only one person can win, others cease to be peers and become obstacles. Joyce and Drusilla are not rivals because they are cruel or malicious. They're rivals because the system has defined success as exclusionary. Harm becomes easier to justify when another person's loss is perceived as the price of one's own survival. Crucially, beauty economies disguise this brutality with the language of choice and merit. Helen is told that if she works hard enough, diets enough, waits patiently enough, her moment will come. When it does not, the failure feels intimate and humiliating. This is what makes scarcity so effective. It individualizes structural violence. Instead of recognizing systemic gatekeeping, Helen directs her rage inward and later sideways toward other women who appear to be winning under the same impossible rules. The episode relentlessly dismantles the myth of meritocracy. Helen is praised, directed, and validated, then quietly passed over. Talent, effort, and discipline do not translate into reward. Instead, success appears arbitrary, relational, or corrupt. Helen's rage is not simply envy, it's the psychic backlash of believing the rules and discovering they were never real. The language Helen uses is telling. She accuses Joyce of spreading her legs to get ahead, invoking one of misogyny's oldest scripts, the idea that women's success is illegitimate unless it is sanctioned by male desire, and even then it is morally suspect. This accusation allows Helen to preserve a sense of moral superiority while still operating within the same system. She rejects the label of sexual opportunist, insisting that she is not that kind of girl, even as she commits far more extreme violations to secure her position. Internalized misogyny often functions this way. It creates rigid moral hierarchies among women while leaving patriarchal standards intact. Importantly, men in the episode remain largely peripheral yet powerful. George, the pageant MC, exerts enormous influence while avoiding direct accountability. The director who praises Helen initially disappears from the story entirely. This absence reinforces the mechanism of horizontal violence. Men create the rules, but women enforce them on one another. Helen's rage never meaningfully touches the men who benefit from the system. It is expended entirely on women who are just as trapped as she is. The episode's final irony, crowning Helen Miss Autopsy, underscores the ultimate cost of internalized misogyny. In trying to prove she is worthy within a misogynistic system, Helen becomes its most faithful enforcer. She destroys herself and others in the process. Beauty Rest suggests that when oppression is internalized, it no longer needs external force to sustain itself. Women are taught to police one another, compete for crumbs, and mistake survival for victory. Helen will starve herself, binge in secret, chemically sedate another woman, forge a suicide note, and ultimately kill, yet she draws the moral line at sleeping with a man for professional advantage. This reveals the perverse ethics of this system. Violence, self-destruction, and deceit are rendered more respectable than sex, so long as they preserve the appearance of purity. Beauty Rest treats the female body as a commodity long before it becomes a corpse, and that continuity is the point. The episode does not depict a fall from innocence into violence. It depicts a system that has already reduced women to objects of assessment, exchange, and disposal. Death is not a rupture in this economy, but its logical conclusion. The corpse is simply the body's final, fully depersonalized form, no longer required to perform optimism, desirability, or gratitude. From the opening scenes, Helen's body is framed as inventory. It must be thin, compliant, hungry, flexible, and endlessly available for judgment. Casting rooms, pageants, and auditions operate like markets with artificial scarcity, where value is determined by youth, novelty, and perceived purity. The cruelty of the system lies not only in exclusion, but in false proximity. Helen is always almost chosen, kept close enough to hope that she continues to submit. Her body is never her own, it's always pending approval. What sharpens the episode's cynicism is how quickly the body becomes interchangeable. Joyce's death does not disrupt the pageant machine, it lubricates it. Her body disappears, her note becomes a transferable asset, and her absence creates opportunity. The system does not mourn lost bodies because it is structured to absorb them. In this sense, Joyce's corpse is not tragic within the logic of the episode. It is administratively convenient. The pageant's final reveal completes the metaphor with brutal clarity. The body that once needed to smile, answer questions, and project wholesomeness is now literally opened, examined, and labeled. The title turns death into spectacle and satire, underscoring how little separates glamour from dissection. Both are modes of looking, both are institutionalized forms of control. The joke lands because it is structurally accurate. The system that appraises women in life continues to appraise them in death. This is where the episode's dark humor becomes especially incisive. The corpse's punchline is not merely a shock value, it exposes how normalized bodily violation already is. Autopsy, like the pageant, is an authorized invasion. In both cases, the body is silent, the institution speaks, and meaning is imposed from above. The laughter the ending provokes is uncomfortable because it mirrors the casual cruelty that made the outcome inevitable. Helen's trajectory reveals how internalized this logic becomes. She doesn't see herself as destroying bodies, she sees herself as managing obstacles. Joyce and Drusilla cease to be people and become impediments to advancement. This is the psychological cost of commodification. When one's own body is treated as a product, other bodies become competitors or waste. Violence becomes procedural rather than emotional, justified by the same metrics used to justify rejection and erasure. Ultimately, Beautyrest argues that when bodies are reduced to commodities, death loses its moral gravity. A corpse can be crowned, labeled, or laughed at because the system has already stripped it of subjectivity. The final image is not a twist, but a diagnosis. A culture that consumes women aesthetically will eventually consume them literally, and then congratulate itself for its cleverness. Beautyrest is not merely a cautionary tale about ambition, it is a systemic critique of industries that manufacture desperation, pit women against one another, and disguise exploitation as opportunity. The horror does not lie in Helen's actions alone, but in a culture that teaches her, patiently, relentlessly, that her value expires, her chances are shrinking, and that winning is the only form of worth that counts. Mimi Rogers played Helen, and she was really fantastic here. She also acted in Ginger Snaps, Lost in Space, and Austin Powers' International Man of Mystery. Drusilla was played by Jennifer Rubin, and she was in Screamers and A Nightmare on Elm Street 3. Kathy Ireland played Joyce, and she was in a movie called Loaded Weapon 1, an alien from LA. The director of this episode was Stephen Hopkins, who is best known for directing A Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child, as well as Predator 2. This episode would not be easy to pull off as a director, so many kudos to him for nailing this one. The writer was Terry Black, who wrote one of my favorite episodes, The Reluctant Vampire, as well as 3 other episodes of Tales from the Crypt. He's also known for writing Dead Heat from 1988. He was brilliant in this episode, I wouldn't change a thing. Overall, this is the perfect episode of Tales from the Crypt, and I have to rate it a 10 out of 10 for the show. Let me know your thoughts down below, and remember to be well and stay spooky.